Today's one is Burnout, Moral Injury, the Stigma and the Way Back to Being Healthy, with our wonderful Dr. Ola Abbas here today. So before I go and tell you a little bit more about Dr. Ola, just to tell you a little bit about Kaushalya UK that has put on this fantastic event, to name but a few. Kaushalya UK itself is a registered not-for-profit community organisation. It works to empower and uplift women, and it's growing organically. It's going in leaps and bounds at the moment under the dynamic leadership, of course, of Ritu Sharma here, who is the founder and the CEO of Kaushalya UK. I've been as part of Kaushalya UK as a volunteer for many years now, and I've had a lot of opportunities and projects that I've worked on, and it's just amazing to see the work that's being done here. And to be part of it, I just feel really proud and privileged as well. And the whole point of Kaushalya UK here is to help on an education-based model, as an independent organisation, just helping to increase knowledge for women. And there's financial development, personal, professional development, helping with mental well-being as well, lifestyle. There's so much covered, and it's just a fantastic place to be. And to continue being part of this journey, I'm just feel so blessed. So to let you know a little bit about myself, I am Suman Mangra. We of course usually have Zina Kula as our host, our mumpreneur of the group. However, due to circumstances, I've kind of just helping out stepped in today, and it's actually been so nice and refreshing to be called back in. So I've jumped at the opportunity. I said, why not? I'll help out. So I am actually a mindset and manifestation coach. I do personal and professional development as well. I do training. Training and coaching is my main area of expertise, and especially helping people in the mindset realm, everything to do with law of attraction. How can you get yourself in the positive mindset? How can you get yourself vibrationally, energetically aligned with your goals, your missions, start achieving those goals, live the life of your purpose, live the life of your desires. Sometimes we're a bit lost in the sense of our belief systems have clouded our judgments, the way we've been conditioned growing up, the way we've been programmed. And it's all about rewiring the mind and reprogramming ourselves so that we can be in that best potential of space of ourselves. And once we're the best version of ourselves, we can start hitting those goals and living that life that we really truly deserve, each and every one of us. And everybody I ever meet, I always feel like we haven't even scratched the surface. So if anybody wants to know more about what I do, I will be shortly adding my details in the chat box, and you can of course take a note of that. And if you wish to get in touch with me, I'm of course across the social media accounts under the company that I'm registered under as Manifestation Maven. So I'll put my details in the chat box. But enough about myself. Now over to our wonderful Dr. Ola Abbas. So where do we start with Dr. Ola? Anything I'm going to share right now is just going to be a short few words, but I think it only, again, is just scratching the surface for what Dr. Ola is all about. So Ola is a dual accredited critical care and acute medicine consultant in the NHS and a marketing director in her training, building her own global travel network marketing business. She's just mentioned a minute ago as well about her travel. So I always get excited when I hear about travel too. Ola is passionate about well-being through travel. She believes that what we do, we deserve more from a job than long hours, burnout and lack of appreciation. And honestly, I really resonate with that because there has been a lot of that in my history of my career. She's recently left a full-time job in the NHS to pursue her mission of helping 10,000 professionals get out of the rat race. And we are joined here for that. I think we're all here for that, aren't we? Her mission is to empower professionals to travel more, travel smart, and create wealth and well-being from travel, all of a life that they love, and elevate their lifestyle. So without further ado, over to our wonderful Dr. Ola Abbas.
Thank you so much, Suman, for that lovely introduction. Truly humbled and very proud and privileged to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me to give this talk, which when the topic, Zina, I think, was the first person who reached out to me. And when we first had the conversation about burnout, I was like, this definitely resonates with what I've been through. So I was very happy to share my story, share what I have learned from being in burnout twice, not just once, because it can happen more than once, apparently. And
Yeah, I think sometimes we can have like cycles, can't we? Repeat patterns until, and again, something that I do in my field of work as well, breaking those patterns
exactly.
and helping people understand. I did just want to quickly mention as well for everybody in the room, if we can just keep ourselves on mute now for the duration of of course, talk, and questions, if we can save them till the end, would be great. Of course, if at any point, Dr. Ola, yourself, you wish to open up the group for a discussion or questions, then you can kind of lead that. Yeah,
Absolutely, yeah, not a problem at all. Thank you for that.
fantastic. Thank you.
So yeah, thank you very much for having me on today in this space to share about my experience and also help other women not go through what I have personally been through. I do have a few slides, but it's a relatively small number that we've got on tonight. So if we can have it interactive, that would be absolutely fantastic. You've got the chat box, and also as the evening continues, I can open it up for group conversation as well as appropriate. So we're going to talk about today burnout, the moral stigma, the moral injury, the stigma as well that comes with it, and also the way back. And like Suman had introduced me just a little bit earlier, I just wanted to touch on this and say that I am a marketing director at the moment for my travel franchise. I'm a business consultant, I'm a coach and mentor. I'm also an international best-selling author of a book called Dream Big and Do Bigger. And I'm also a chief growth officer for an organization that helps doctors find alternative careers. And I've been a consultant in intensive care and acute medicine. So I'm still a doctor, I just chose not to practice clinically. And the reason that I list all of these things is because I was doing one thing, being a consultant in intensive care and acute medicine, or doing my medical training and my clinical work, and I burnt out. But now I do so many other things, and I'm so happy and very feeling fulfilled in what I am doing. And the reason that I say that is that because people don't burn out from doing too much, they burn out because they don't do enough of the things that give them value, that they give them purpose, things that align with them and make them fulfilled and happy. So it's not a matter of how many things you're juggling, how many hats you are wearing. It can be one thing, but it can wear you down to the ground. So I wanted to touch on tonight, talking a little bit about what burnout actually is. Because some people mistake it as a mental illness or as a mental health issue, or it might be like as a disease, or can mistake it also with chronic fatigue. But actually burnout till now does not have a definition of a disease. Till now, it's just a phenomenon, right? And it's a phenomenon of emotional and physical exhaustion from experiencing very long-term stress. And it is quite striking that if we look at the UK, there was a survey done not a long time ago, I think about 18 months ago, by an independent group that looked at organizations in the UK that have at least 100 employees. And those were private or public organizations, and they found that 79% of the staff across different organizations, different sectors, were suffering from burnout, which is quite striking. And to note that this was done after the pandemic, and this is a factor that comes into play, obviously. 35% of those staff were in extreme stages of burnout and nearing leaving their job or going off sick and getting help for it, which is obviously not how far you want to leave it before you start asking for help. 58% were already seeking new opportunities. And we know from a study done at the tail end of last year, because part of my work is in recruitment, we know that the main factor for employees to change their workplace is work-life balance. Whether they have hit burnout or whether they're about to hit burnout. And very strikingly is that people don't change jobs because they get better money. They change it because they're not having that work-life balance. And even if they are going to another job that they get a pay cut from, they're happy to do so, even in the current living crisis, because it's about how they feel and how they're able to function in their new life rather than about the job itself. And the reason that I really stressed here mentioning that burnout is a state of emotional and physical exhaustion, both of them. And it's really important because physical exhaustion, you can relieve that by rest. You can sleep, you can get physically rested in order to relieve that physical exhaustion. But when you're struggling with that emotional exhaustion, then you need to have mental processing to go on, and you might need the help of a coach, or you might need the help of a therapist to go through that emotional stress and burden that you have been experiencing. And it's really, really, really important to also know and that when you are getting to the point of you are manifesting burnout, it is not that's when it started. It had already started long before that. So when you're starting to manifest those symptoms, you've already accumulated a large amount of stress already that's already held in your body. You got to that tipping point, and then you're starting to manifest it. Because that also factors in how long you are going to need in order to recover. Let me just go back one slide. So factors in terms of what can lead to burnout. And one of them, and the main one, is the workload that you would have and the backlog of workload as well. And that especially is something that we have witnessed during the COVID pandemic, and also after the COVID pandemic, whether that is with an increased amount of work that we had to deal with, especially in the NHS where I was working. The waiting lists are still a predicament till this day, and also having to work with less amount of people, or having to work with less resources, for example, when you're working remotely. Decision fatigue as well is a very important factor, and it's not something that all of us consciously think about. Because if you wind back to the time of when we had the pandemic and when it was in full-blown mode, the amount of decisions that we had to make as individuals on daily basis for things that we used to take for granted were huge. We needed to decide on things as simple as, when do I go for the grocery shopping? How long am I going to spend? Am I going to get that or this? Is this mask good enough? Am I in the right distance? Am I in the right queue? Is this person close to me? So there were so many decisions that we had to make that normally we didn't make. And that is why COVID had added an extra layer of decision fatigue on top of everything else that we have been doing. Put into that as well, lack of control, lack of insufficient reward and support at your workplace, but also very importantly, factors that play into burnout is value misalignment and also their gender. So women are far more susceptible to having burnout than men. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, in just a little bit on my following slide. The symptoms that will come out doesn't necessarily always show up as, being fatigue or being drained, or they also can be can mimic depression symptoms or anxiety symptoms, which is really important to get to the bottom of them. Because one, you'd need to have antidepressants or therapy or go down that treatment route, and burnout doesn't necessarily need that. But so you can also feel defeated, trapped, being alone, feeling resentful. Like every time someone asks you or something, you'd be like, just leave me alone. Why are you asking me? I can't even, I can't look after myself. Why am I looking after someone else? Kind of feeling. And it also leads to procrastination and you taking longer to be able to do the same thing that you used to do. And that leads to frustration, and it leads to overwhelm as well. And the symptoms, we quite often fight these symptoms because part of it is the stigma and part of it is lack of awareness of what is going on. We don't want to say that we're not coping. We don't want to say that we're asking for help. And so we keep on going far longer than what we should be going. And your body starts to show up. Physically, you're there, but emotionally, you're not. Mentally, you've given up a long time ago. And that's definitely been part of my experience, because I remember like going through the pandemic with it being that stressful time period, whether that is from the social isolation, the decision fatigue, the workload, the type of work that I did, being in intensive care, having to do all the kinds of life and death decisions that I had to make. And I kept on going and I kept on showing up, because that's what you do. That's the culture. That's, you know, you keep on going, you keep calm and you keep on going. And I got to a point where I remember I was driving to work and I just started crying. And I was like, where is this even coming from? And I just kind of like felt that breakdown. But again, me, little old me, superwoman, didn't even want to accept it at that point. And I kept on driving, and I got to work, and I wiped my tears and I went into the office, and I sat down, and then someone asked me, hey, how you doing? You know, that casual, hey, how you doing? And I started crying again. And then I was like, okay, I need to go home. That's when I took it seriously. But that was after way too long of a time period of all of these accumulations of the physical and the emotional exhaustion, and then it finally came up to the surface. So I'm actually interested to know from the attendees who we have here on tonight, and you can use the chat box, who has been witnessed something similar to this, whether it is burnout, whether you've been diagnosed, self-diagnosed, whether it's been an experience of a colleague or a friend or someone around you. Just out of interest to know how much you've been exposed to it. Melanie, all of the symptoms. Yeah. And it is quite a difficult experience to go through. And earlier in the conversation, I was saying, like, you know, you can hit it twice, because if you don't properly address it the first time round, and if you don't really understand what's coming behind it and what's going on with you internally, or even like with you physically, of how can you prevent it the next time, you're not really going to prevent it the next time. It's going to come back. And the first time that I had that feeling of burnout was when I finished my training as a registrar, as a doctor, and qualified as a consultant. And I got that point that I was like exhausted. I was drained. The last few shifts, I don't know how I was getting myself out of bed, but it was out of that obligation of like, I can't leave my colleagues. Who's going to cover my work? I need to go and see my patients. It was that calling. I had to just go. And I don't know how I finished that job. And I got to that point of like where I'm about to take on the consultant job. I did take on the offer, but I said, hold on, I need to have a break. And at that point, to me, I didn't quite know that it was burnout. I thought it was just physical exhaustion from doing too much in too little time. And I took some time to try and figure out what I wanted to do and how my future is going to shape up and all of that. And I went traveling. And obviously I got really excited about the travel. I spent about 5 months solo traveling. It was also the time that I met my now husband. So it was a really, really beautiful experience that I had at that time. And I came back feeling rejuvenated, recharged. I was like, yeah, let's do this. But also in the back of my head, I was thinking, how can I stop this from happening to me again? And that's when I started to think about, let's have more options in life and let's do something else. And that's how the travel business basically was born out. But I didn't quite get to being in the travel business full time before my second burnout hit. But, we got there eventually. So I'm seeing quite a few comments coming here in the chat of saying severe anxiety lasted 3 months. I can totally relate. Similar experiences. Melanie saying that she walked out of her job in February just because you can't give any more. And I totally relate to that. Anxiety, depression, definitely burnout. Me too, personally experienced burnout. And thank you so much for sharing. I really value that you've been able to share that. You are obviously in a safe place and in a supportive environment, and it's very important. And I'm going to come and talk about it in just a second about overcoming burnout. It's important to actually be able to talk about it. So thank you so much for sharing. One of the things that I mentioned in the factors, I mentioned about value misalignment, and I also mentioned about gender and women. And I think majority of us here tonight on today's session are women. We are more susceptible to hitting burnout. And the reason for that being is how our bodies work, how our own physiology as a woman works. And it's really important for us as women to understand this, so that we know what our needs are and how we can cater for them and stop ourselves from going into burnout. So there's this difference between man and woman. But we came into the whole corporate world that was designed originally for a physiology of a man. And then the woman came into it to compete in this corporate world and to demand equality. And so the woman had to work to what a man's physiology was, although she doesn't have a man's physiology. And to put it very simply, men, they have a hormonal cycle or physiological cycle of their 24 hours. So they wake up in the morning, they're at their peak. That's when their hormones start to all fire up and get excited to go to work. They achieve. And then they start to have a decline in the evening, and it drops at the night. And then in the next morning, the cycle starts up again. So if you think about it, in our productive world of 9 to 5, achieve, the man's physiology is absolutely perfect for it, because this is how they work. But a woman's physiology is quite different to that. And a woman's physiology go over a 28-day cycle. And that is also related to our own internal hormonal balance. And you go through these phases in a month. So you start off with your spring, where you're feeling creative, you're bouncing with energy, you can take on the world, you've got all of these ideas, they're flowing through you, you've got great concentration. But then that slowly moves into your summer, where you start to connect more with your emotions, and you probably become more expressive, communication becomes higher value for you, attentive to detail and all of that. And then you move into your fall, where you start to feel drawn inwards, and you start to kind of like look at, reevaluate things and make decisions. And it's a really good time actually for you in the fall to be making big decisions about your life. And then you move into the winter, where that is like you going into the core. That is when you renew, when you reflect, when your womb renews. And that is the time where you crave resting, and you just cannot be bothered with what's going on in the world. And it's really important to know where you are at a given time within this. Each woman is going to be slightly different to another one, but generally speaking, we will pass through these 4 phases in a month's time, and then we recycle again in the other month. And it is really worth taking stock of this and knowing when are you going to be at your peak activity and when are you going to be in your fall or winter time, because then you can spread out your workload accordingly. Now, I appreciate maybe not everybody would be able to do so. And like when I started to learn more and more about this, I just kind of like thought back into, right, okay, so when I was in my job and I had to do like a 72-hour on call, I'd go in the morning on a Friday, I'd come out on a Monday. There's no way for me to go like, actually, I'm in my winter, so you know what, I'm not going to cover the whole weekend on call. I'm not going to show up because I need to be alone and drinking hot chocolate and be with a hot water bottle. Now, obviously, that's not possible when you're in a job. It would be a bit different when you're in your own business. And that's certainly something that I'm enjoying now, is being able to move my projects and my things around to fit to where my energy peaks are. But I suppose the point from it is, if you've got a full-time employment and you don't really have much control of it, or even if you're a full-time mother, because that's a full-time job in itself, be mindful of where you are at within that 4-weekly cycle or that monthly cycle. And if you do have something that is heavy going in your fall or winter, just make sure you take out extra time to rest, double up your rest time to recover from it, because repeated I would say insults to your body, repeated insults to your physiology at times when your body can't handle it or wouldn't want to be handling it, doesn't have the energy for it, it just requires to have more rest further down the line so that you don't hit burnout. How are we relating to this, ladies? How many of you looked at that and said, oh, that I can totally relate to that cycle, and that you find yourself in different times in the month that, you know, this is a good time for me, this is not a good time for me, etc. Yep, definitely been there, done that. Yeah, personal experience. Yeah, can relate. Yeah, absolutely. And it's really becomes very powerful when you start to apply it, because obviously as women, we know that we have, like, you know, a hormonal change that happens throughout the month. But it's really important when you actually start putting it down on paper and start matching it to what you are doing. And it starts sometimes to make sense. You go like, actually, no wonder I'm burnt out. I've done all of these kind of things, probably at the wrong time for me, and I didn't counter in time for me to cope and recover from it. So Suman is saying, I came across a seasonal book once which spoke about these elements and to work on ourselves and also projects. Yeah, absolutely. I've come across where, like, they say that you need to be charting this over ideally 3 months. And you chart like your energy level and what you feel like you're doing and which part of your cycle you're in. And then you can reflect on that and be like, actually, I know what my phases of energy are going to be like. And it's very important for us women, because as I mentioned, our physiology is different. We're living in a man's world, we're working in a man's world, but with a different physiology, which put us at a higher risk of burnout. Now, the other thing that I wanted to talk about, which is also very, very important, and it is really core to my story of how I came in to suffer with burnout. And it is about values, and like, how well do you know your values, and how well are you aligned with your values in the things that you do? And you can feel free to drop in the chat some of your values that you feel you are living, that are important to you. And then if you feel that you are living in alignments with your value. Because for me, something that I really strongly value is connection, is freedom, and is also being able to help others. Recognition comes after that, and independence. But those are the things, those were core things that I was missing in my job. There were core things that I just was not able to, my job was not able to accommodate for me, apart from helping others, because obviously I can help my patients. But in terms of freedom, being able to do what I needed to do, be where I want to do, have that flexibility in my schedule, I just didn't have that. My freedom value was completely X'd out. My independence value was completely X'd out. My recognition value was completely X'd out. And also connection with my family, with my loved ones, that was very much limited, A, because there was COVID, but then also because how the job was pretty much antisocial, that it took away all of these things from me. But again, in every day's grind, you just keep calm and carry on, because that's what you do. And after a while, you feel burnt out because those core values that are really important to you are not being met in what you do. And that's really important to recognize as well. So I'm just gonna, there are different values, obviously, and each one of us are going to values different things. So it might be that, you know, kindness is important for you, diligence, it might be being in service, discipline, ambition, connectedness, accountability, financial security. Each one of us is going to have different values to them, and it is really important to know what is your values and to actually live in alignment with them, because not only that you get burnt out if you're not living in alignment of them, but depending on how misaligned you are with your values in a certain time period, you can suffer from moral injury. And now moral injury it's not just necessarily a heightened degree of burnout, it is actually a disease category in itself. It has been described to resemble PTSD. but it does have slight differences to it. It is similar to PTSD in a fact that it can come on at a time of war, at a time of pandemic. It can come on in abusive relationships, in toxic workplaces, from traumatic, tragic events, and also the accumulations of like micro incidents that accumulate and then just take your toll on you. And basically what it means is that your morality has become injured because the values that you live to serve are not being met in what you're doing, or that you're having to make decisions which you deem unethical and immoral according to your own compass, but you're having to do them because that is your job. And I certainly know that there's been a lot of doctors, self included, during the pandemic, we had to do certain decisions. We had to ration healthcare in order to meet the justice factor for the whole society. But the way that the resources were designed and the way that the system was managed, it put us in moral conflict that we're not doing our best job possible. And that is like a really dangerous stage to be in. And I've certainly seen colleagues who've gone down that and not come back, whether that is not come back to work because they were just too struggle so much to come back to work, or whether it was because they went and they took their lives. And that's it's something that does happen, but it's very sad that it actually happens nowadays. The stigma of talking about burnout or even talking about moral injury, it is quite shocking that as up until a few months ago, a Harvard Business Review said that it's still a taboo in workplaces, which is completely wrong. We associate it with blame, guilt, feeling inadequate, that you're not enough, that it leads to impacting obviously on your mental health, and it's a consequence of that would be suicide attempts or colleagues that would not show up anymore to work. It's definitely a dark road, and it's definitely something that I saw myself walking down, but I managed to stop and get the help that I needed at the time that I needed it, and I was able to actually go back to work. And when I did go back to work, I did another evaluation. And I think for me, that worked out miles better for my own personal gain, so to speak, for my own personal confidence, is that I'm back, I can do this job, but now I actually choose not to do it because I can now impact thousands of people in a positive way. And while me being happy as an entrepreneur than I did as a burnt out doctor. And that, to me, that's the world of a difference. Yeah, so I'll go through the way back. Feel free to share down here some of what your thoughts would be on how you can come back from burnout, or how you can prevent burnout, or things that you have done and it has helped you. It might light up a bulb for someone else sat here. I'm just going to look at some comments here. Oh, we've got a question from Susan. Do different times of the day affect us, night owls and morning larks? Different times of the day don't necessarily affect you from a hormonal or physiological point, but that is down to what your personal preference is. And again, that is really important for you to notice. Because if you are someone who tends to wake up early and goes to bed early at night, then working night shifts is definitely going to burn you out, or evening shifts, it's definitely going to burn you out. So it's really important to know that about yourself, Susan. And so, for example, I don't like early mornings, and for quite a long time I forced myself to wake up early, but then I just got to a point where I can't do this anymore, and I stopped doing it. And I noticed that, like, the more I force myself to wake up early, the more I have a backlog of sleep debt that I need to replenish. So for me, that just totally doesn't work. But it doesn't mean that it's part of like the hormonal circle. It's just kind of like how we are, I suppose. I hate 9-to-5 job. I prefer flexible working. Yeah, totally hear you on that. Totally hear you on that. I was just reflecting today and thinking, like, how far I have come. I was able to wake up today. I switched off my alarm because I felt I needed to have more sleep, while when I was at my job, that was a luxury that I could not afford to have. I would have to spring out of bed. I would have to go through traffic. I would have to, and I'll have that stress of like, if I'm like a few minutes late, I will have that, my heart would be pounding and I'll be stressed, like, oh, I've got there late, and like, you know, that kind of feeling, which is an unnecessary extra amount of raising your heart rate and creating that adrenaline and cortisol surge within your body that just does not do you well. And we all know that stress has been linked to heart disease, hypertension, stroke, diabetes, etc. But I was reflecting that I didn't need to do that today, and I was okay having my coffee and writing in my journal. And then when I finished work at 6, my husband gave me a call, and immediately I just thought, actually, if I had finished work at 6 at the hospital, then it would have been 7:30 before I could be able to get back home. So I'm very, very much grateful for being able to live a flexible lifestyle, and that definitely helps when your value is obviously freedom. So spending time in nature, absolutely. Self-care, this is all about the way back to being healthy and preventing burnout. Being around loved ones, doing fun activity, fun movies, yes, absolutely. Simple self-care, manicure, face mask, absolutely 100%. Regular meditation. Meditation is medication. Medication in itself is a form of therapy. So connecting with yourself, connecting with nature, and connecting with others, and very importantly is talking about your experience, because just by talking about how you were burnt out, unknowingly you might be supporting someone else, even if they don't share what their story is, and even if they didn't feel comfortable, because I know I didn't feel comfortable for the longest time to talk about my own story. And I know when I was interviewed earlier this year on Sky News, after the interview, I just felt like, maybe I shared too much. Are they going to think that I'm weak? What are they going to think about me? And, you know, I really had those questions go through my mind. But then I actually thought, you know what? No, because I had messages from other doctors and from other colleagues and saying, thank you that you shared your story, because this has empowered us as well to share our story. So definitely talk about it. And the greatest gift that you can ever give yourself is to love yourself unconditionally, is to let go of expectations, is to make sure that you're living in alignment with your own values. Because if you're not, then trust me, it's a life that's not worth living. And certainly one of the things that I had to practice, and I'm still work in progress on it, is about setting boundaries, like time boundaries. What are the things that are you going to say yes to? What are the things you're going to be saying no to? Make sure that you're constantly evaluating that, and you know where your energy reserves, what you're spending your energy on. Think of your energy like money. And if it is something that you wouldn't put down money for, then why are you putting your own energy towards? So I hope you have found this helpful, useful, valuable. I hope it gave you some light bulbs here and there. You can connect with me more on my website, Elevate with Ola. info@elevatewithola.com is my email, and then my Instagram @elevatewithola. So all of it very easy to remember. And then my Facebook group is the Wealthy Travel Community, and that's where we talk about a lot of wellness, a lot of wealth making from travel. So thank you very much, everyone, for sharing your parts of the story. Thank you very much for being part of our talk tonight. Don't know if there are any questions that I missed in the chat box.
I think we just had a lot of people giving their thoughts on the back of the last question you had asked around how to get yourself away from being in that burnout space. How do you deal with it, cope? And a lot of amazing things being shared here, such as reflection, being spiritual, connecting with yourself, things like that.
I love that you said cleaning.
I know it just came up because there's times that I can switch off sometimes when I just zone out, and if I'm just like, and a lot of people sometimes do it, they can go into this mode of cleaning, but it's like almost physical cleaning is helping with like mental cleaning.
Absolutely. Well, do you know that Bill Gates, Bill Gates insists on washing the dishes every night because this is his way of to just kind of like, not
Switching
look
off.
at a screen, not look at paper, just to his thoughts, clear his head, calm his mind before he goes to sleep. So it's there's definitely something to do with that ritual.
I think it's like different people will find different things, like kind of they label it therapeutic. And so sometimes just like there has been times when I've washed dishes and I've found it therapeutic. Sometimes people like drawing and colouring and things like that, doodling. So
Yeah.
this different things will help different people. I think you gave some amazing suggestions as well. It's been such a good talk today. Like honestly, I really feel like it came at
Sorry,
a good
Rita's
time
saying
for
I
me.
find ironing therapeutic. I leave all the ironing to my husband.
Yeah, ironing can be as well. My husband says it as well. He finds it therapeutic, ironing. So I'm like, all right. But yeah, it was definitely such a good talk. Really enjoyed that. And we got some really good feedback as well. I know I was putting in your email when it came to the end, so I've accidentally done a typo. It is elevatewithola.com, guys.
Yes.
So if you want to email Ola, of course. So
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
I wonder if there is any other questions at all. I mean, feel free, you can unmute yourselves if you wish to ask a question to Ola directly, of course. Or if you wish to just put it in the chat box, then I can of course share that as well. I'm sure there's loads of questions. I think that one that was around the night owls and the morning larks was a good question, Susan. I really appreciate you asking that one,
Thanks.
because I'm definitely a night owl, and I think I have heard somewhere as well about the circadian rhythms that are different for women and men, which is echoing exactly what you was talking about today, Ola. And I think it's something that's I think only dawning on people now,
Yep.
these kind of things. And I think because it's still such a new concept, I think because we're still in this man-made world, as they
Yeah.
say, I think some people are still a bit hesitant to be open to this line of thinking that, oh, what are we talking about? Some people keep finding like the word feminism like toxic almost, and then they pulling away from something that could be actually really fruitful and helping their organizations, given that majority of companies now are working towards having 50% of women, females there, and 50% leadership, women leadership. If majority of your workforce is going to be females, to understand women better will only make the workforces more productive. And and you know what's really interesting, and it's a bit of a side topic, but I just feel like adding this. I was talking about this the other day about our monthly cycles that we have, and I just randomly said to my friend, I was saying, because my niece has just finished her GCSEs recently, I said, women, even from when teenage girls are doing the same exams, they once a month are having their week. Some people less, some people more, but generally they're having that time when they're uncomfortable, they can't focus, they're tired, they're aching, they just want to switch off. Yet they're still having to have that same revision cycles, homework cycles,
Yep.
doing the same amount of hours to do their studies. And isn't it funny that they still sometimes get better grades statistically than men, given that they actually physically have and mentally have less time to do these things? And then when we're in the workforce, I was saying the government should give us 1 day allowance a month at least to cope with
Totally.
these
At
female
least.
issues. Come on, we deal with so much as women.
Or at least be understanding and accommodating enough to know that actually during this time they can do the administrative, the less amount of work from home, that kind of like accommodations, because
100%.
we know very much there's going to be another week or 10 days where they're going to be absolutely on fire and they're going to do the whole department's work for a whole month in advance. So I think having that kind of understanding and that flexible working accommodation in working definitely would go a long way. Because I mean, I didn't mention it in the talk, but like the prime reason for people hitting burnout is actually not the individual themselves. It's not their own resilience or capacity. It's the system that they work in. And that's always been cited as the main reason. And if the organization makes changes around that to accommodate the individual, then we won't even hit this problem in the first place. So yeah, it is interesting that we're into 2023 and organization seems to still works on the 1960s.
Honestly, they just about were open to working from home because of COVID. COVID, I always say, was a mass movement of collective thinking, collective, what do they call it? The conscious collective. Yeah. For years, we'd been hearing people saying, I wish I could work from home, wish I could work from home. And then boom, we all were like, all right, you're all sent home now.
It's definitely, it feels like COVID has been like this slap across the whole world's face of like, you guys need to reset yourselves because like where you're going is not a good place.
Yeah, and I think when COVID hit as well, I was actually made redundant just at that time, and then everything slowed down for me so much, and I didn't realize how fast paced I'd been working the whole time because we normalize it for ourselves.
Yeah,
it becomes second nature that it's normal. We don't even realize we're doing it. So yeah, I think everything you talked about today, I made like plenty of notes, so scribbling away at the back. Yeah, it was really helpful. I really appreciated it. I know the ladies here did as well. So yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Ola, for sharing today all your pearls of wisdom. It's been amazing. I don't know, Ritu, if you've got any final thoughts or final words. It'll be great. We can bring the session to a close.
I just want to say a big thank you, of course, to Ola for all the insights and the expertise she's shared with us. One thing that stands out for me, Ola, is, the cycle that you talked about, 4-week cycle. Of course, we all experience that, but I have never heard it said in such a set way. And it's like an acknowledgement. You think, oh, I'm not going nuts. This is okay.
Yeah. It's like, oh God, it's not me.
It's not me. It's natural. And, I'm okay. I'm not going mad. And, sometimes you snap, and sometimes you're overthinking and you're overreacting. And we have a joke at home where whenever that phase is on, kids will say, oh, mom's going through her menopause thing. Mom's going through. And it's like every month, every other month. But thank you so much for everything you've shared here tonight. It is. That is what Kaushalya UK stands for, creating safe spaces for dialogues like this, which are so much needed. And for women especially, just acknowledging ourselves and accepting that it's okay to be different because we are, and, to behave differently because we are. And for wonderful people like yourselves who volunteer to share this great knowledge with us as well. And your precious, very precious time, which is the commodity of a lifetime. So I'm absolutely grateful for that, Ola. Really heartfelt. Thank you. A big thank you to Zina as well for connecting us with Dr. Ola. And a big thank you to Suman for stepping it right at the last minute and saving us.
I'm here with my Kaushalya mug.
Yeah, there you are. And everybody else who's been here on the call tonight to share your wonderful time with us. Thank you very much. Please stay connected. If you'd be like to add it on to a WhatsApp group, just drop your phone number to me directly on a one-to-one basis. I'll add you on. We do share all our updates there and some personal touch-off messages, of course. We are online, so please, if nothing more, give us a like or a share. That is very much appreciated as well. Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much.